everyone. Welcome to another AOH webinar. My name's Dr. Kelly Johnston and I have the pleasure of chairing our session today. So today's topic is an update on the WorkSafe Victorian silica-related activities. I will just share some slides and we can keep going. So part of the AOH Council 2022 Council initiative is to have a council member chair each of these webinar sessions that we have this year as a way of us getting to know you all and you getting to know us all. So to go through who our current council members are for 2022, we have Kate Cole, who is our president, Tracy Bentz, who's the president-elect, Alex Todorovic, who's the treasurer, Neil Golding, who's our secretary, and then we have the three councillor positions, which are Candice Dix, Melanie Windus, and myself. Not sure if you were able to hear me then, I got kicked off. So you would have seen in that fantastic presentation that Bo prepared for us that we have our conference coming up very shortly. So it's the 2021 conference that was needed to be moved due to COVID to March. And so it's in Sydney on the 19th of March to the 23rd of March. And we would love to see you all there to enjoy the fantastic lineup that we have on offer for that March conference. Again, I think I keep pressing the wrong button. Our basic principles courses, of course. So we have a sold out offering in Melbourne in February, the Sydney offering in March, a Brisbane offering of the course in May to June, and a Perth offering in August for our basic principles courses. We also have a whole suite of other professional development and education offerings that we'll be bringing forward this year. I can't tell you any more details than that, but stay tuned to some fantastic other offerings in the PD&E area from the AOH this year. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our three presenters today. So we have Halil Ahmet, is a Principal Occupational Hygienist with WorkSafe Victoria. He manages a team of occupational hygienists that addresses hygiene issues across the state, and is also appointed as an inspector under the Occupational Health and Safety Act and the Dangerous Goods Act. Halil has been engaged with WorkSafe Victoria as an occupational hygienist since 1990, and in that time has visited hundreds of workplaces regarding a wide range of hazards such as asbestos, silica, isocyanates, wood dust, noise, heat, fever, and of course COVID-19, as well as having input into the development of various regulations and codes. We also have with us today on the webinar Meryl Ashton. Meryl has been an inspector at WorkSafe for 20 years and is the group leader of the Silica team in the Regulated Industries Division. For the last 2 years, the focus has been on conducting silica-related inspections and working towards the WorkSafe Victoria Strategic Silica Intervention Program. The Silica team is a team of inspectors that was established to focus on silica-related hazards within industry, in particular targeting the stonemason industry. And lastly, we have Nirmar Ko, who joined WorkSafe Victoria in 2020, working in licensing and claim recovery and performance before moving to the Silicosis Health Assessment team in 2021. Nirmar was heavily involved in the transition from the health assessment program to the Alfred Occupational Respiratory Clinic, stepping into her current role of clinic advisor, recovery and support as facilitator of the clinic for WorkSafe Victoria. So now I would like to hand over to Halil to start off our webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. I'll just put up the presentation. Okay. All right. As Kelly said, I'll be talking to you on some of the silica-related activities that WorkSafe is involved in. I've got a lot of slides, and Meryl has a lot of slides, so we'll try and push through them as quickly but as effectively as we can. Slides, my slides might be a little bit boring. They're about regulations. Regulations aren't that exciting, but I think they're worth running through and understanding. A little bit of background first, just on the regs and WorkSafe's intervention for silica. Then the actual new regulations, the Crystalline Silica Regulations of 2021. And then Meryl will run you through the silica field team that she looks after, that she heads, and their inspections of stonemasons, their interventions, what they found, etc., and the engineered stone licenses. And then, as Kelly mentioned, Niama will then run you through the respiratory clinic that Alfred offers through WorkSafe. So let's go. I suppose this is just a little bit of background, and it's trying to describe how WorkSafe can intervene. And we've got general inspectorates across Victoria, construction inspectorate also spread across Victoria, where they can be program visits, they can be reactive visits. Earth Resources that also looks at, specifically at silica-related matters on their sites. And as Kelly's mentioned, the silica field team that's under Meryl, that is primarily at the moment focusing on engineered stone, but its scope is broader as well. And then we've got the occupational hygiene unit, my team, that assists all of these areas in trying to provide sound occupational hygiene advice for the workplaces that they deal with, as well as having input into the legislation. We've also got a programs area that we assist in developing programs to focus on silica. And I put stakeholders, communications and marketing, so they have a big part in WorkSafe's activities as well, and trying to prevent illness and disease. And then we've recently established a small group to look at emerging issues, and we're using silica as a bit of a platform to use to enhance our ability to sort of try and predict what might happen down the track. And obviously prosecutions is a tool, not a great tool, but it is a tool to try and prevent potentially others from going down the same path. Just a little bit of background in terms of the actual legislation. Silica has been covered for quite a while in specific legislation. We've had the OHS has subs regulations of 1999. They covered silica both in its respirable form, such as silica flour, and in its solid form, such as engineered stone. We then had the OHS regulations of 2007, so part 4.1, hazardous substances. That rolled over into the next set of regulations, 2017, which once again, silica was covered under part 4.1, hazardous substances. Around the time of engineered stone showing up as a big issue in terms of silica-related illnesses, the 2019 regulations were developed to specifically focus on them. Short set of regulations with some specific controls or specific regs. They were interim, and they've now been replaced with part 4.5 in the regulations, and which is specifically for crystalline silica. And just worth emphasising that part 4.5 applies in addition to part 4.1, so they're not separate. And then we've always had and still continue to have the overarching Occupational Health and Safety Act of 85 and now 2004 that we can use as well. Also, just in terms of compensation, the Victorian government can proclaim diseases, certain diseases, as diseases which, if you like, compensation is pretty much automatic. And the list of proclaimed diseases in Victoria included silicosis with or without pulmonary tuberculosis. As part of the Vic government's action plan to address workplace risks relating to silica, especially when incidents of high incidence of silicosis at workplaces started occurring, WorkSafe reviewed the list and ended up proclaiming diseases for stonemasons and those working with engineered stone. So those are two new diseases were there's lung cancer with silicosis and scleroderma with silicosis. Essentially, it means if you're diagnosed with that disease, you don't have to jump through a whole heap of hoops to be able for the disease to be accepted as one of compensation. So the regulations themselves, so part 4.5, they're under the OHS regulations 2017, but they were made in 2021, just late in 2021, broken up into 5 divisions. Introductory matters. I always recommend people go back to introductory matters to understand the definitions. There's a lot of terms used in these regulations, I think more than some of the other regs, and really important to go back to the definitions and understand those terms that are used. Division 2 is about duties that are placed on manufacturers and suppliers of crystalline silica substances, crystalline silica substances is a term that's defined in the regs, and I'll go into that in a moment. Division 3 is about duties of employers. So duties of employers that undertake high-risk crystalline silica work, that's also defined, and I'll go over that. Duties to provide information, duties to specific measures for engineered stone employers as well as suppliers. And then we've got the licensing requirements in Division 4 and transitional provisions in Division 5. Not going to talk about this, just to say that the slides will be provided, will be available at the end. And this is not a bad slide to look at to understand when certain regs kick in and who those regs apply to. So it's trying to give a bit of a summary in the one slide, which I think is worthwhile having a look at just to understand that. Okay, so definitions. Crystalline silica, very basic, means crystalline polymorphs of silica and includes the following. The crystalline silica substance, it's used in regs in a number of places, so worth getting your head around. It means the substance has more than 1% crystalline silica. It's likely to be processed, mechanically processed, etc., so that you're generating dust from it, and it is not in a respirable form. So when you sort of first obtain it, it's not in respirable form. Examples there are a brick. You're going to cut the brick. You're going to generate dust. Concrete. You're going to cut it into it. Ceramic tiles, same thing. Autoclaved, aerated concrete as well. So they're examples of crystalline silica substances. They're not in respirable form, but they are going to be mechanically generated, and they contain greater than 1% of crystalline silica. Engineered stone is basically a manufactured composite stone material, contains resins as well as what we've defined as greater than 40% or more of crystalline silica. If people were familiar with our previous regulations, 2019 ones that have now crossed into these regs, we had crystalline silica, engineered stone, defined as containing 80% or more of crystalline silica. We did some sampling of the material and really established a lot of the material and really established that they can come down to almost as low as 40%. So we've used 40% as the cutoff there. And that is a bit of a difference with the national definition, but that's Victoria's definition. So that's engineered stone. Then we've got engineered stone processes. So a process that involves engineered stone in a workplace that generates the dust from it itself. And then it includes, but is not limited to those activities that are on the screen there. Then we've got what's called an engineered stone control plan. So if you'd like to compare this to something, you can compare it to a SWIMS. So if you're undertaking this sort of work, if you're a stonemason undertaking this sort of work, you would need an engineered stone control plan, and they're the things that need to be covered in that plan. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well as we go forward. So a lot of definitions, so my apologies for that, but need to really understand the definitions. So then we've got crystalline silica processes. And this is really a list of activities that WorkSafe has sat down and looked at, explored to try and come up with. These are activities we believe are potentially generating high levels of crystalline silica, airborne crystalline silica. So we've included them as specific activities. And if you're captured as this type of activity, crystalline silica process, then you have additional duties that flow on from there. So I think the next slide just gives you a visual. And quarrying, chasing, we've got concrete chasing, power tool, road header, untunneling, jackhammering, screening, etc. So shotcreting, etc. So they would all be captured as a crystalline silica process. Now, going beyond that, so we've got a crystalline silica process, any one of those activities, and then there's the term high-risk crystalline silica work. So if you're undertaking a crystalline silica process, then you need to establish whether you are likely to be above half the exposure standard. So your employees are likely to be above half the exposure standard. If you are, then you're a crystalline silica. You're a high-risk crystalline. You're undertaking high-risk crystalline silica work, or you could deem it, or it's regarded as a risk. But I think the exposure standard for generally would be the way to go if you can go down that path. So then we got another statement, another definition that's worth remembering: crystalline silica hazard control statement. Now, this is in relation to the high-risk crystalline silica work. So you've got a crystalline silica process. It's the definition of what they are. So if it ends up being a high-risk crystalline silica work, above half the exposure standard, then you have to create, the employer or duty holder has to create a crystalline silica hazard control statement. And once again, similar to the engineered stone control plan, this is similar to a SWIMS. So you can capture this as a SWIMS as well. So as long as all the factors down there are captured, that would suffice. Okay, so they're the definitions. They're the key definitions. There are other definitions, so I'd say go back and have a look. But they're the definitions. So let's have a look at Division 2. And these are duties of manufacturers and suppliers. So I think I said that the regs were made on 15 November 2021. Now, these regulations under Division 2 come into play from 15 May 2022, so in a few months' time. They apply to manufacturers and to the manufacture and supply of crystalline silica substances. So we just went through that. We went through a few. So the crystalline silica substances, greater than 1% crystalline silica, that's mechanically processed, and in the form that it's supplied, it's not in respirable form. So engineered stone would fit under this. Autoclave bricks, sort of material bricks that are going to be cut would fit under this definition. So from 15 May, there is a duty. The manufacturer or suppliers have to give information in writing to the person to whom they supply the substance, and also on request to the person who proposes to use the substance, crystalline silica substance. Now, the information, and this is a little bit like a mini SDS. The SDS term is not used in these regs, but it is a little bit like a mini SDS. It has to specify the proportion. So it has to have percentage of crystalline silica in it, name and address of the manufacturer or importing supplier, and controls that are required when using it, and how to handle and store it. Similar to an SDS, the information has to be reviewed and revised where necessary, and as a minimum at least every 5 years. Okay, so they're manufacturer and supplier duties for crystalline silica substances. We go from that division, which is Division 2, to Division 3, and these are the duties of employers and self-employed persons. This is broken into 3 divisions. Subdivision 1 is all about the high-risk crystalline silica work. So, crystalline silica processes, greater than the exposure standard, half the exposure standard, you end up being a high-risk crystalline silica work. Now, this section applies from 15 May 2022 as well, so it kicks in a few months' time. Doesn't apply to engineered stone license holder or persons undertaking an engineered stone process, so it's only for the high-risk crystalline silica work. And it's really, before undertaking a crystalline silica process, the duty holders has to do a risk assessment and has to identify if they have got high-risk crystalline silica work that they're undertaking. The alternative there is to assume that you've got high-risk crystalline silica work, so you don't have to go through that risk assessment process. If you are undertaking a risk assessment process, there are factors that need to be considered, and they're listed there. The amount of silica, etc., any previous results, atmospheric results, etc. If after doing that assessment you're still uncertain, the regs require you to assume that you've got a high-risk crystalline silica work until you determine other ways down the track. So, continuing with Subdivision 1. The requirement is to make a written record of that risk assessment as well. So and the record, you have to have a written record whether it's a high-risk crystalline silica work, whether it ends up being high-risk crystalline silica work, or whether it still is a crystalline silica process. So that's worth knowing. So if an inspector rolls up to a workplace and they identify a crystalline silica process, they'll be asking for the risk assessment, or they could be asking for the risk assessment, and you need to have it at hand. It has to be a written record, and it has to be accessible. You can't perform high-risk crystalline silica work unless you've got a crystalline silica control statement. So that was the equivalent of the SWIMS that I mentioned earlier, and it has to be prepared before the work is commenced or commences, and you have to do the work in accordance with that document, and it has to be kept for the duration of the work as well. As I said, it's not, I don't think it's too onerous because it is a SWIMS, and most workplaces that undertake this type of work would be used to SWIMS anyway. Okay, so we've moved from Division 3, Subdivision 1, to Division 3, Subdivision 2. This is about provision of information in relation to high-risk crystalline silica work. And once again, similar to Subdivision 1, it kicks in on 15 May 2022. And it doesn't apply to engineered stone or license holders or engineered stone processes. So from 15 May, if I'm undertaking a high-risk crystalline silica work and someone is applying for a position that will involve that work, I have to inform them. So applicants, I have to inform them of the health risks and the controls required. I have to also provide them with existing employees, with information that's health risk controls, etc. So now moving into subdivision 3. So now we're talking about engineered stone. So we're talking about duties of employers and self-employed persons under this division. And this applies, well, this started applying from 15 November 2021. So the employer that's undertaking this sort of process must ensure a power tool or mechanical plant is used, a power tool or mechanical plant is used on an engineering process, that it's used with integrated water, or it has on-tool dust extraction, and that is either dust class stage or something or similar system that captures the dust. The reg is I suppose deliberately vague in that sense. It's a dust class stage where you need to establish that you've got a similar system that can capture it. So A and B are really the way to go. If there is the alternative where we say if A or B is not reasonably practicable, then local exhaust ventilation, essentially not fitted onto the tool, may be used. But from Merrill's team's experience and my hygiene unit's experience, A and B should always be practicable. We haven't come across a situation where A and B would not be practicable. In addition to those, the employer has to, where employees are undertaking an engineered stone process, has to ensure that they're providing employees with respiratory protective equipment, and they also have to ensure that the equipment is used as well. So not just provided, used. So supervision is a big factor. There is a separate duty under the Act for employees to wear, to basically use or wear RPE, if you like, where they've been provided with appropriate information, instruction, and training. And that's the other requirement for employees, that they do provide that information, instruction, training on the use of the power tools, mechanical plant, and the respiratory protective equipment in terms of fit maintenance and use. There's a regulation that talks about you can't use compressed air for area or personal cleaning. Although there is a bit of an out, it does say unless exposure doesn't exceed the exposure standard, less than or equal to. Just some examples of the integrated water delivery system on mechanical plants. At a large piece of plant, water suppression from the time you start the machine to the time the machine is stopped, basically. Various pieces of plant there. Also got power tools, hand tools, just various forms of water suppression. And sometimes this does take a little bit of fiddling around with the instrument to get the appropriate water suppression or the appropriate method to establish that water suppression is effective, guards, etc., or points of water suppression as well. And then just in relation to B that I had on the previous slide, on-tool dust extraction, I'm sure we've all seen this before. Okay, so I mentioned early on that there is dual duties. So for high-risk crystalline silica work and engineered stone processes, you've got all the duties that I've mentioned. Some of them kick in May. But you've also got the duties in part 4.1, so under the hazardous substances regulations. And I've highlighted the main ones, really, what I believe are the main ones here. So you've got the control of risk regulation, the one with the hierarchy of controls. So we walk into a workplace and we see dust going everywhere. We would, an inspector would issue a notice under that regulation. They might issue other requirements under the crystalline silica regulations, but they would issue a notice under that regulation to control the actual risk. There's the requirement for doing atmospheric monitoring, whether in a high-risk crystalline silica work or a stonemason's workplace, falls back to the HAZSUBS regs, and it's essentially where there's uncertainty about the exposure standard in the workplace. Now, if an inspector walks in and there's dust going everywhere, they won't issue a notice for monitoring. They'll issue a notice to control the risk. If they come back afterwards and there's still uncertainty, then they would issue an air monitoring notice. If they go into a workplace and it's absolutely fantastic, they would just say, brilliant, I'll move on to the next issue. Health monitoring is also under the hazardous substance regulations, and it's where the wording in the regs, similar to national requirements, is exposure is reasonably likely to have an adverse effect on the employee's health. Generally, we use the exposure standard, but it doesn't state the exposure standard, so it is about where they're likely to have an adverse effect on the employee's health. So as I said, there's some of the requirements for the HAZSUBS regs that apply across to high-risk crystalline silica work and engineered stone. Not all, but some. A little bit on licensing requirements so Division 4. So an employer or self-employed person must hold an engineered stone license if they're undertaking an engineered stone process. Remembering that's where you're using the engineered stone, it's greater than 40% crystalline silica, and you're generating dust from it. So if you're doing that, so all stonemasons essentially have to apply for a license. There's an important aspect. So the supplier of that sort of material, Caesar stones, lithostones, silestone, all those companies that supply the stone, that they, and this, I should have said, this reg kicks in from 15 November 2022. So at the end of, later in this year, November later this year. So by then, the supplier cannot supply the engineered stone, where an engineered stone process is being undertaken, unless the person that they're supplying to has an engineered stone license. And the supplier has to ask for records, has to ask for information, has to ask for the WorkSafe license number, and they have to keep records that they've supplied to that person, etc., and for at least 5 years, which is a little bit like a carcinogen license in the requirements for that. In relation to the license holder from 15 November, that similarly for other duties that I've just mentioned, they have to provide an applicant with information on health risks, etc., employees with information, instruction, training, etc. If they have to undertake health monitoring, the health monitoring, this is a little bit different. The health monitoring has to be carried out under the supervision of a specialist occupational environmental physician or a specialist respiratory and sleep medicine physician. So this is a little bit different. The HACCP's regs talk about under the supervision of a medical practitioner. So this is quite specialist information, only because of the issues associated with stonemasons and silica-related illnesses, and trying to pick up the information in the tests that they do. The other difference as well is that where health monitoring or atmospheric monitoring is undertaken at a workplace, all the results have to be provided to WorkSafe within 30 days of receiving those results. So there'll be a lot of health monitoring reports and air monitoring reports that we'll be reviewing and come that time. The workplace also has to have an engineered stone control plan, and that plan actually has to be in effect as of when the regs were made. So that doesn't wait till 15 November 2022. And as I said, similar to SWIMS, but it's at the workplace that they undertake that work. And they have to provide, and if someone ceases employment, they have to provide that person with a statement to say that they've worked with engineered stone, and a recommendation to do further testing, health assessments, and even specify what those health assessment tests should be. So that's the engineered stone license requirements. Before I hand over to Meryl, there's a few things that's worth highlighting. Meryl's team is the Silica field team, and as Kelly mentioned, they're focusing on visiting stonemasons, looking at compliance issues and licensing issues at the moment as well. They're going to be very busy with the licenses that they're going to have to process. They have a senior hygienist from my team that is assigned to the Silica field team and to assist them in all of the silica-related matters across the board. And that person's role is also to undertake air monitoring at stonemasons for us to gain a better understanding. However, I think it's telling me hoping that you can still hear me. This is the Silica field team, and I'm talking about the Silica field team. They've got an occupational hygienist from my team that is assisting them with all silica-related matters. Part of their role is to do monitoring at stonemasons. We're a little bit restricted in the stonemasons that we're selecting. They have to be willing to participate, but they also have to be, if you like, good operators. Our legal people have advised us not to undertake monitoring at workplaces where controls are required. Just go straight to controls, straight to issuing notices for controls. So we're a little bit limited in what we can monitor in that sense. So far, we've done monitoring at 9 stonemasons, and the intent is to do a fair few more, but also to then possibly extend it beyond stonemasons, maybe look at crystalline silica processes. One of the interesting aspects of the monitoring is the water filtration process. And I'll show you a couple of slides on that in a moment, where we're looking at the turbidity and the appearance. Meryl will also talk to you about some of the guidance material that we've got and we're developing, and Niama will go through the Alfred Hospital requirements as well. But just in relation to the water filtration, I'm basically trying to show you some slides, photos, I should say, of a workplace that's got a very basic process for water filtration. At a stonemason site, you've got channels dug into, usually you've got channels dug into the concrete floor. The water is captured, runs into a pit, as you can see on the pit here is on the top left. From the pit, it settles, water runs across, it pumps across or runs across into a next pit, and then from there, in this workplace, what they've done is they've used an IBC container with a bag to filter out the water from the second pit. And if you go down to the second row from the left again, it's running into the IBC container, into the container there, and then from that pit, from the IBC container, the water runs into a next pit, and then that water is recovered. So in some places, we've got several IBC filtration processes. Others have got more sophisticated processes. But it really is the maintenance of that process. So you've got, and this is the turbidity measurements that I've referred to before. So you've got the sample on the left, number one, which comes with the instrument, the turbidity meter, and that you just test it against it to get the 20 NTUs, the unit that's used. The second one there, number two, is the initial settling pit that we saw in the top left-hand corner. So around 245, just as a reference point or a reference number, if you like. And then the pit post-filtration, so before storage tank, it's come down to 118. And then at the point of reuse at the mechanical saw, then you've got a level of 67.7. So you can see that there is a difference. It is important. Maintenance is a big factor, and it is important with these units. So I think I will hand it over to Meryl now. Meryl, it's all yours. I'm hoping, yes, great, you can hear me, excellent. So maybe I'll just, thank you. Yeah, I'll just be in the background. I know we're well over.
Oh, sorry guys, I'll go back with my back. Apologies for that. Thank you very much. My name is Meryl Ashen. As Halil said before, I'm the Silica Field group leader for the Silica Field team. So today I'm going to present to you an overview of who the Silica Field team is and also what our focus has been over the last couple of years. Touch a bit more on the air monitoring program that has been done by the dedicated hygienist that's from Halil's team who supports the Silica Field team, and also go through the engineered stone licensing process. It will be an overview of it. I'm trying to give you as much information as there is. There might be some repetitive stuff I said that Halil's already said already, but I'll just repeat them again. And like I said, we'll provide you with the slides of those details as well. And then I'll go over also some guidance material that is available for the stonemason industry and also to support you guys out in the field so when doing air monitoring, etc. If that's the service you're providing to stonemasons, so what guidance material there are. I just wanted to give you an overview of the team structure. So the team structure is I'm the group leader of the Silica Field team. I have a senior inspector in my team, and I have 3 technical inspectors that supports the team as well. We have the senior hygienist, as we've stated before, that supports the Silica Field team on following up on inspections related to silica matters and also doing the air monitoring program within the stonemason industry. And I also have a dedicated project officer that supports the team in developing our strategic project framework and monitoring our work and etc. as well. So the Silica team was established mainly to focus on silica hazards. At the moment, we target the stonemason industry, and the team was established in April 2020, and we had an inspection framework established at that time. We're a state-based team undertaking inspections related to strategic and response type work. And the main focus, like I said, is currently to the stonemason workplaces, but we also undertake inspections and support the construction and other industries using products, materials containing crystalline silica as well. We undertake inspections to review compliance under the OHS Act and in line with the new crystalline silica regs, and we also review control measures in place. During those inspections, we provide guidance and information to the duty holder on how to comply with those duties and the obligations. And currently at the moment, our main focus is providing information in relation to the engineered stone licensing requirement and the engineered stone control plan as well. If during these inspections we identify issues, we may issue notices such as improvement notice or prohibition notices, and we'll give a direction to the duty holder to implement appropriate control measures and fix them by a certain date. One of the other things my team members also do is we actually follow up on the air monitoring reports that are provided to stonemasons once they've engaged a consultant to do air monitoring. We look at what the results were, and we also look at what the controls have been mentioned in there that need to be implemented. So we follow up on air monitoring reports as well. As mentioned before, health monitoring reports health monitoring is required to be undertaken, and if health monitoring reports at the moment have recommendations stated, we follow up on those that have been provided by a medical practitioner. As Halil stated before, under the current regulations now, health monitoring reports only have to be provided to WorkSafe Victoria if there's been a recommendation. However, from November 14th, 2022, the requirement, whether there's recommendations or not, health monitoring reports will need to be provided to WorkSafe. The other work that the Silica team do is, like I said, we support the senior hygienists in doing the air monitoring program as well. We assist in that process as well. We've also been actively involved in the participation in the development of the amended Crystalline Silica Regulations and also the guidance material, some that are currently in place now and also future guidance material that will come in when other sections of the regulations will come into play. As well as one of the other things we do, the Silica field team have been actively promoting the former WorkSafe Health assessment program and also now currently the Alfred Occupational Respiratory Clinic that will be explained later in the presentation. Just want to give you a bit of an overview of the industry that we're involved with. So there's approximately 450 stonemasons located in the metro and regional area of Victoria, and 80% of these stonemasons are considered small businesses. So ranging from less than 10 to or less than 5 employees at those workplaces. And a large proportion of these stonemasons who in this industry are of cultural and linguistically diverse backgrounds. So the type of nationalities that we're engaging in is Chinese, Vietnamese, Afghan, Greek, Italian, Turkish, and Arabic. So there's such a diverse range of nationalities that makes our job more interesting in knowing how to engage with these different type of nationalities and making sure language has been understood. But I'll go into more detail about that as well. This next 2 slides I'm presenting, I hope you can see it clearly, is just to give you an oversight of the types of places that we're going to. So the data I'm showing here is data from April 2020 to January 2022. And as you can see, our industry main focus at the time is within stonemason industry, and most stonemasons fall within the manufacturing industry, as you can see there. The majority of our work falls into the manufacturing area. The next one is wholesale trade. So those are like supply. So we've had projects where we've gone to places like Caesar Stone, who supply the stone to workplaces to see how they're safely unloading and loading out of shipping containers. So we also have a focus of that. As you know, if you're not aware, there's been some serious incidents, fatalities with the loading and unloading of shipping containers and stone slabs falling on stonemasons. So that's a focus of us. As you can also tell, we've got focus in the construction industry as well. And this probably that second graph there just reiterates that majority of our workplaces is small business, and 80% of our workplaces fall into that category. I haven't shown, I know this is a national forum, but just to give you an indication. So within Melbourne, majority of our stonemason intervention falls into the southeastern area and the northwestern area of Melbourne as well. So to give you an idea of our visits, so like I said, 75.4% of our team's intervention is strategic based, and 24.6% of our response is also response work. And that response work includes incidents and following up on allegation of health and safety concerns provided to that's been provided by the public. So we follow up on those allegations and make inquiries at the stonemason and review the control measures in place. As I said before, majority of visits are strategic based, and when we do that, we're reviewing compliance under the previous interim regulations and also the hazardous substance regulations, which are still in play. And now also we're reviewing under the new Crystalline Silica regulations as well. As you can see from our data for the last 2 years since April 2020, we've done over 700 workplace inspections to stonemasons and issued close to 470 notices. Be mindful that, and if you can appreciate, majority of our visits were done during the pandemic. And so as a result, we've had to adjust our scope of work, the way we undertake our inspections and our framework to take in line the protocols and the restrictions we had with the COVID restrictions. But I still feel we've made an impact within the industry with how many inspections we've done in the last 2 years with the stonemasons. The other thing I just wanted to touch on here as well is just to give you an idea and a theme of what notices we are issuing to stonemasons. So Under the control of risk, under 163, under the hazardous substance regulations, we are issuing notices for uncontrolled processes during the cutting, grinding of abrasive polishing of engineered stone, either using mechanical plant or on-tool or hand tools, where they haven't implemented integrated water delivery system or there was no on-tool extraction as well, while by using like a H-class vacuum cleaner. The other ones we also look at is where we've seen this poor housekeeping. So where that we know results in poor housekeeping practice, it results in the secondary exposure to the stonemason. We also issue, as a little read before, well, we can issue health monitoring. We issue health monitoring notice where we identify that health monitoring hasn't been undertaken by the stonemason. If there's uncertainty about the exposure within the workplace, we issue atmospheric monitoring notices as well. And one of the other pieces we also issue a lot of notices in that space is training on the respiratory protective equipment provided. We sometimes identify that there's a lacking of understanding of the reason why they need to use it, how to use it properly, how to store it, how to maintain it. I'll go through more of that soon as well. I just wanted to give you an idea. I know Halil's showed a couple of other pictures, but just to give you an idea of other type of machinery, mechanical plant that we come across while doing our inspections. So this is integrated water delivery system. Majority of these machines, when we're going out to workplace, uses recycled water as part of the system and fresh water for hand tools. Halil showed you some other pictures before, such as bridge saws, but I just wanted to read it. So there's an edge belter polisher in picture number 1. Number 2, a miter saw used for polishing of using for the edging on stone, and then there's the water jet cutter machine as well that we can sometimes see at some stonemasons. Just to reiterate, this is integrated water delivery system for power tools. So when we go in our inspections, as we know, the use of on-tool water suppression or dust extraction is the most effective way to minimise the exposure to respirable crystalline silica when handheld power tools are used. So when we look at this, we look at is the adequate water feeds on the blade, good spray control, and making sure there's guarding on it to deflect the water down towards the slab as well, and looking at whether there's appropriate guarding on it as well. So when we look at that, we look at feeds, we make sure there's guards fitted, such as with guards, plastic flaps, brush guards, etc. as well. And we also look at if recycled water is used with that, is it being adequately treated? I'll go to the next slide. I know we're with time. Some of the other things, I just want to give examples of some of the other tools we see. So we've got a cutting hand tool, polishing hand tool there. We've also got there in that bottom picture there is a hand operated polishing machine as well. As Halil was saying, when we go to workplace, there's a range of different type of recycled water systems at workplace, and most of the time it's in-house made, different configurations, but these are more off-the-shelf market ones that can be. So this one on the left is the filtration extrusion press filter, and the one on the right here is a dehydrator machine. So the things to consider in relation to this is following the consideration. When we go to inspections, visually inspect the recycled and recirculated water. So if we see the water as cloudy or milky appearance, this means it's likely to contain a high concentration of RCS. We also look at how they maintain it. So are they using processes to extract slurry from the system as well? And also are they using flocculant as an irregular basin to make sure that they consolidate the crystalline silica particles in the recycled water? So those are things we're looking at. And like Halil said earlier, we are trying to gather a lot of data, including myself, the inspectors, and also the hygienists, where we're trying to get water samples with taking turbidity measurements and images and information of different types of systems to try and work out which sort of system works well to make sure it's been adequately treated and be better informed of the different types of recycling water systems as well. On-tool extraction, in the stonemason industry, it's required that you must use a H-class vacuum cleaner. We also look at that makes the shroud, removes that there's a shroud included, that it encloses and captures the dust as well. Like we read out before, we believe, and from our intervention, that on-tool extraction with integrated water or on-tool extraction with a H-class vacuum is achievable, and it's reasonable practice to implement those two as well. Just wanted to give you an overview of some of the other tools we've seen for on-tool extraction. So the capture hood is the most important part of the system. The capture hood should sit as close as possible to the point of where the dust is generated to ensure that all the airborne dust created from the work process is captured as well. As well, select on-tool extractions that are interlocked with tool extraction where possible, so that when the tool is activated, the extraction begins operating shortly before the tool can be used and continues after the tool operation is complete. Just wanted to give you an example. One of the requirements under these regulations, the regulation 319T talks about employer must ensure the system is used and designed and installed as it was intended to reduce the risk of exposure. And also the other provision with that is 319 U is the use and maintenance. So the employer must ensure that the specific control measures that are implemented is used and maintained to ensure the risk control. So there's it's designed and installed and used and maintained. So I just wanted to show some of these pictures. This here at the very top image shows that a separate hose has been directed to work, which provides inappropriate water suppression. And this means that it's not an integrated system at all, where this is the preferred method, and to meet compliance under the regulation 319S it needs to be an integrated water delivery system. The image at the bottom there is where a person is undertaking shadow vacuuming, which provides inappropriate dust extraction. They may be using a H-class vacuum cleaner, however, it's not an integrated system. And when you're doing on-tool extraction using a H-class vacuum, it needs to be an integrated system to undertake that task. The other things on inspections we look at is the type of PPE they're wearing during the task. As Halil reiterated, the requirement now under these regulations is that the employer needs to provide PPE, as well as then needs to make sure that the employees are using the PPE when undertaking the engineered stone process. The things we look at when we go to workplaces is whether the employers are wearing tight-fitting respirators and making sure they're clean-shaven. When we're doing these visits, and I'll just go to the next slide to show you, the things we look at, we also review the training. And when we undertake our inspection, we don't just make inquiries to the employer in relation to what training they provided in relation to their PPE, but we also make inquiries with the stonemason to making sure, do they have a good understanding as to why they need to use it, the importance of being clean shaven, how do they store it correctly, how do they maintain it, and even to the point that we ask them sometimes to demonstrate, can they do a fit check? And that's how we make our inquiries and determination, have they got adequate training? And then we might, if it's been demonstrated they haven't, we'll provide improvements to in relation to providing training in that. Housekeeping is another one where we have issues, where our preferred method, it's no dry sweeping, no high pressure hose, it's only wet sweeping, wet screening. It's cleaning after each task, not waiting to build up at the end of the day. One of the other things in these regulations is compressed air must not be used in the work area where engineered stone process has been undertaken, on clothing or persons wearing, or even to clean a surface. So that's been implemented in these regulations as well. Sorry. The next one, I just want to talk about our air monitoring program. So like Halil said before, the Silica team is supported by a senior hygienist from the WorkSafe Hygiene unit that supports and assists us on silica matters, as well as actively undertaking air monitoring. So our focus is currently to review control measures used to reduce the risk of exposure to respirable crystalline silica, including water testing at workplaces, by taking a small water sample and placing this in the turbidity meter. We to date only have a small sample collection, but our plan is to increase the collection and gain a better understanding of the water quality and treatment of water containing crystalline silica. As to date, there's limited research and information on recycled water in the stonemason area, so we are hopeful the water quality testing may lead to guidance for industry on what is regarded as adequately treated. As referenced earlier by Halil, our scope of work and our AMP strategy is limited by our legal advice currently, as well as we've got to be mindful that we are the regulator. But to date, we've completed 9 AMP inspections. The aim is to use this data collected from our AMP inspections to give us a better understanding and to confirm what type of control measures can and will achieve low levels below the exposure standard. And this information will be used as part of future guidance material for the purpose of improving workplace health and safety. Bo, am I okay with time to keep going, or do you want me to? Okay, I'll keep going. Thank you. Just double checking.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to go through the engineered stone process licensing with you. So introduction of Australia's first licence scheme for the engineered stone, as required by employers or self-employed persons undertaking the engineered stone process at the workplace for which they are responsible. So as Halil has reiterated before, an engineered stone process is a process involving engineered stone at a workplace that generates crystalline silica dust, including cutting, grinding, or abrasive polishing. So for example, if an employer has 2 factories where cutting or grinding or abrasive polishing is undertaken, then 2 individual licenses will need to be obtained as well. A license holder will be authorised to undertake engineered stone process at their workplace to which the license relates to. Installation work involving an engineered stone process can occur at another workplace by the license holder or other license holders' employees where it's not reasonably practical to do that work. So for example, if they had installers as part of their business, the installers will be able to undertake small types of works while doing the install. However, if it's large parts of work, best practice would be to bring it back to the factory. I just want to give you an overview, again, what Halil said is, so the key features are supply of engineered stone, so to restrict the supply. So that basically means supply of engineered stone must not supply to a person who does not have a license. The next one is information to the job applicants, reiterated by the high risk, but also part of the engineered stone. So employer who is an engineered stone license holder must ensure that job applicants are provided with information about the health risks they're working with engineered stone, the need for, and the details and control measures. The other new one is also information instruction and training. So they must make sure they provide information instruction training to the employees in relation to the health risks while the controls are in place as well. Like I said, health monitoring, Halil touched on that. The health monitoring now needs to be not just done by a medical practitioner, but it's a specialist registered medical practitioner that is a occupational environmental physician or a specialist respiratory and sleep physician as well. As well, they need to provide the health and respiratory monitoring to WorkSafe within 30 days of receipt, and that comes into effect not until November, that one. Engineered stone control plan is required and needs to be developed in accordance with 319 ZF, where it actually details the processes that needs to be in place, and I'll go into more detail in a minute. And the statement of work as well is at the in relation to employers who are engineered stone license holder must give all employees a statement of work once the employer ceases work. So listen, how long they've worked there with engineered stone, advise them on their medical, periodic medical test, etc. What we're advising is to get that relevant information is when that from a medical practitioner, specialist respiratory physician, sleep medicine physician in relation to that statement of information. As mentioned before, the engineered stone license has a 12-month transition period. So it started on the 15th of November and the final transition period will be till the 14th of November 2022. So employers and self-employers must undertake an engineered stone process, must apply for the license on the 15th of November 2021 or soon after that day. Employers and self-employed can undertake an engineered stone process during that transition period while their license is being determined. However, they must prepare an engineered stone control plan during that time. It's the online system to apply for your license. WorkSafe can take up to 60 days to process a license to make a determination. And during the transition period, at the moment, the application fee is free. However, after that date, it will be approximately $305 for the license to obtain. The license will be digital form and the license will be valid for 5 years. Anyone that obtains a license within this transition period, they'll be future dated to the 15th of November 2022, and the license holder and suppliers will be able to validate a license on the WorkSafe portal to verify if someone holds the appropriate license has engineered stone license before being supplied with engineered stone, like for example, Caesar stone. I just wanted to show you, this is an example of what the engineered stone control plan looks like. The engineered control plan is available on the WorkSafe website. The engineered stone plan is an editable document, it's electronic, and like Halil said before, it is a JS similar to a safe work method statement. The employees who undertake an engineered stone technically do not have to use our template that's available on our website. However, the ESC must be prepared in accordance with 319 ZF before any work involving the engineered stone process is undertaken and must ensure the work is performed within accordance with the plan. So just to reiterate, it must include identify the engineered stone process and state the hazards and the risks associated, describe the risk control measures and how the risk control measures are to be implemented. Other requirements in relation to the ESCP is the ESCP must be readily accessible and understood by the people who have to use it as well. So if it needs to be translated into other languages, that's a consideration the stonemason must make as well. They must work in accordance with the ESCP, and they must review and revise if necessary. And that might be when indications that the control measures are not controlling the risk adequately, or if after an incident has occurred as well, you need to review and revise your control measures as well. Persons undertaking an engineered stone process during the transition period must adhere to an engineered stone control plan requirement. And when an applicant puts in an application to WorkSafe to put in for an engineered stone license, the requirement is that engineered stone code plan has to be uploaded with their application as well when consideration. Just wanted to go through, there's quite a vast amount of guidance material available on our website. I just wanted to highlight a couple of key ones that are good to use. So the stonemason preventing crystalline silica exposure is a document that outlines all the risk control measures, etc. It's a good piece of guidance to refer employees to who undertake an engineered stone process. One of the other key pieces of work I'll highlight is changes to protect Victorian working with crystalline silica. So this document has developed to summarise the changes for duty holders, as well as provides you with the dates in the Pacific divisions as to when certain parts of these regulations come into effect. The other one I just want to highlight and refer to is the compliance code. However, the compliance code for crystalline silica is currently under review. And there's a disclaimer on our website that if you looking at taking advice within the compliance, that you might not meet all the requirements because this hasn't been updated to reflect the new changes, but that will be updated accordingly before the 15th of November 2022. The other two pieces of information to highlight is the engineered stone process checklist. So this has been developed to assist those undertaking the engineered stone process. So it's an editable checklist, and it covers the information of information instruction and training, RPE, housekeeping, atmosphere monitoring, and health monitoring as well. And this will be updated. And of course, there's the interactive engineer control plan that's available on our website. I just wanted to show that those are the three key pieces that are available. That's on our website now. The only other thing I just wanted to say, some of you might have done air monitoring at workplaces and provided air monitoring reports. And when we've seen at workplaces air monitoring, it's just something I wanted to reiterate, is taking to mind that English is, majority of our stonemasons are of non-English speaking background. So I was just reiterating to be mindful of the way you communicate with the stonemasons and making sure they understand the report. So whether it may be beneficial that when you're doing the handover reports, making sure they understand the report, whether you have a direct handover delivery or do a briefing session with them so they have a good understanding of what's in their report as well. The other thing with reports we see is a range from the results are all there, the control measures are there, but also looking at making sure you raise with the duty holder, whether if you do that, include that in your reports, is that the legislative requirements that are required in relation to certain provisions of the Act, whether you highlight that within engineering with your atmospheric monitoring reports. The other one was beneficial, as you heard before, is training is one issue that we have with RPE, whether providing training to the stonemason in relation to how the importance of using it, the fit, the use, the maintenance and storage. I don't know whether that's a scope of work when doing air monitoring at workplaces, that's a scope of work that can be adapted as well. Just so the stonemasons understand the importance of using the reasons why they need to wear their RPE and how to use it and maintain it, etc. I just want to thank you all for your time today, and I would like now to hand her to Niyama Ko, who will provide us some information now on the Alfred Hospital. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Meryl. As Meryl said, my name is Niyama, and I'm the Clinic Advisor Recovery and Support at WorkSafe, and my role sits within our Claims Division. I'll be giving you a brief overview today of the Alfred Occupational Respiratory Clinic and our work providing health screenings to workers in the stonemason industry. I am mindful of time, so I'll try and get through this fairly quickly. So in May 2019, WorkSafe Victoria launched the Health Assessment Program with free health screenings provided to workers who had worked in the stonemason industry in Victoria during their lifetime. A dedicated team and hotline was set up, providing end-to-end support from registration to claim lodgement. The program was facilitated through a network of occupational healthcare providers, respiratory physicians, rheumatologists, psychologists, and interpreters. By the time registrations for the health assessment program closed in June 2021, we'd had 1,220 current and former stonemasons register for a screening. With the conclusion of the health assessment program in June, in July 2021, WorkSafe Victoria partnered with the Alfred Hospital to open Australia's only dedicated public hospital occupational respiratory clinic, the Alfred Occupational Respiratory Clinic, or AORC. The clinic provides a more streamlined experience for eligible workers by minimising appointments. A comprehensive one-day visit is centralised with a multidisciplinary approach to diagnosis and management of occupational respiratory diseases, including silicosis. In transitioning to the AORC, some of the eligibility criteria were changed. In order to be eligible for an initial screening at the AORC, workers must meet the following criteria. They must currently be working in the stonemason industry and have been doing so for a period of 3 months or more, and work for a business with 30 employees or less. Workers who did not finish their health assessment program screening are also eligible to continue their assessment through the AORC, regardless of if the criteria above are met. And workers who have previously completed the health assessment program are eligible for a screening through the AORC, provided they meet the eligibility criteria. The clinic advisor confirms the eligibility of workers over the phone before referring to the Alfred. So far, we've had 128 workers referred to the AORC, 33 of which have previously completed the health assessment program. At the completion of each screening, silica hazardous substance health monitoring reports completed by physicians at the AORC are sent to the WorkSafe clinic advisor, with any reports indicating adverse health effects passed on to the Silica field team and the occupational hygiene unit. Reports indicating adverse health effects are also actioned by the clinic advisor. The worker is contacted to discuss how they are coping, if they would like to lodge a claim, and the supports available, ensuring the end-to-end support provided in the original health assessment program continues with the AORC. Moving on to the impact of these programs on claims, since the introduction of the original health assessment program, we've seen a sharp increase in the number of silica-related claims. A total of 443 silica-related claims have been lodged in the Victorian Work Cover Scheme, with 329 of those lodged since the 1st of January 2019. The average age of a claimant with silicosis in the last 12 months is 49 years old, and data indicates that silica-related disease is more prevalent in males. We recognise that support is about more than treatment and weekly compensation. Once a claim is accepted, it's about empowering the worker to look for a new way forward. Whilst the clinic advisor assists to the point of claim lodgement, our claims team ensure our support extends beyond an accepted claim to support workers in taking steps to reskill and retrain for the future. Within our accepted claims, 60% of our active population are utilising occupational rehabilitation, engaged with providers assisting them in returning to safe work. The most successful retraining amongst workers in our cohort is short 1 to 2 day courses such as forklift driving, traffic control, and heavy rigid truck driving. Raising awareness around the risks associated with working with crystalline silica and the importance of health monitoring has also been a significant focus for us. In mid-2019, we launched our first silica awareness campaign, Silica Dust Can Be Deadly from the First Cut, Don't Risk It. We have run this campaign again a number of times. The campaign also ran on print, digital, and radio channels, specifically targeting our culturally and linguistically diverse workers who are predominantly Vietnamese, Chinese, and Italian. In recognition of the large cohort of culturally and linguistically diverse workers in the stonemason industry, we launched a pilot program on our social media channels targeting the Vietnamese and Chinese communities, with videos recorded in Vietnamese, Mandarin, and Cantonese spoken by Vietnamese and Chinese GPs. We saw great results with this approach, including a 30% increase in registrations for Chinese workers when comparing pre- and post-campaign registrations. In April 2021, a personal stories campaign was launched on the WorkSafe Victoria YouTube channel. 4 workers who had been through the health assessment program and had received a diagnosis of silicosis shared their stories. These stories were told by the worker themselves or by actors and touched on different elements of the screening process while also focusing on some of the anxieties a lot of workers experience with the prospect of a diagnosis. We've also held TAFE information sessions with almost 600 students and teachers at Holmesglen and Chisholm TAFEs, and a teacher resource pack was developed and rolled out to all Victorian TAFEs to share with all trade students, not just those undertaking stonemasonry, highlighting the risks associated with using products containing crystalline silica. That's everything from me. I'll hand back over to Halil or Bo, thanks for that.
Time, and it's good to see so many people that have stuck around. But Bo, I'm not sure how you want to progress because we are well over time, so I might take a lead from you in that respect.
Yes, you're most welcome to ask some questions. We are over time, but if people want to stay on, that's fine.
I've tried to answer a couple of questions in the chat column. There was one other question that I haven't got to, but it was asking about the risk assessment process. The risk assessment criteria doesn't specifically say do air monitoring, but does say review past air monitoring results, review the frequency of exposure. And in the end, if there is uncertainty, you can still do air monitoring, or you will have to, the duty holders will have to assume the process is high risk crystalline silica work. So it would be, to the employer's benefit or advantage if they did air monitoring short term and ended up not being high risk crystalline silica work in that respect. There was also a question about the 0.025, the classification of high risk crystalline silica work as the crystalline silica process, as well as being above half the exposure standard, which is 0.025 milligrams per meter cube. We're aware that it's a little bit difficult to have massive confidence, let's say, in the number in terms of the analytical technique. I think from what we understand from laboratories like TestSafe, the ability to analyze is good. Maybe not great, but it is good, and we are sort of hoping it will get better in time as well. But that's the number that we are using, and the more monitoring someone can do, I suppose, for that sort of for the confidence in that number, the better it is. But as I said before, also where there is uncertainty, it falls into a high risk crystalline silica work and needs to be treated that way. Question about medical practitioner. Niama seems to have gone, but Meryl, you might know. There is a how easy is it for workers to book in to see? Niama might go.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm experiencing some technical difficulties.
Yes. The question was how easy it is for workers to book in to see a specialist medical practitioner for health monitoring. I'm assuming that question means outside of the Alfred Hospital. That question, and then what is the cost? Oh, Niama's gone again.
Well, the Alfred Hospital program.
The Alfred Hospital program is free. It's funded. It's funded at the moment for the next few years, but there's no cost to go to the Alfred. But however, you must meet the selection criteria as Niama spoke about. However, if you go to someone outside of the Alfred Hospital, of course, there will be the cost involved for medical health monitoring. Could be range from the blood test to CT scans to respiratory function, lung function testing as well, and there will be a cost involved. I don't know the cost of some of these outside of Alfred Hospital. Niama might be able to give a gauge of how much these things cost.
Yeah, so I was in charge of processing the invoices in the previous health assessment program when they were received by WorkSafe. It obviously very much depends on how many appointments and tests are required, as that varies from worker to worker. But for a standard test where they're kind of there's no need to see any specialists, we were looking at a cost around the $600 to $800 mark. And then if a specialist is required, that initial appointment with a respiratory physician comes in at about $1,500. So then once they start adding up in terms of follow-on appointments and rheumatology appointments, it can get quite costly.
And I suppose the other thing about health monitoring, our regs don't specify, we don't have a schedule that specifies the type of tests that need to be done. And in relation to this particular area, that's why there is a heavy reliance on specialists in the field. It's not saying go to a medical practitioner, it's basically saying go to a specialist that has that additional knowledge that's required. Okay. Can't think of any other questions, but I think as new questions come up, we can always provide answers, and I think they can be made available at a later point in time. So
exactly, I'll download any questions. that came from the chat that we didn't get to answer, and we can respond to them privately.
Great.
There is somebody that's just coming through at the moment who asked a question earlier. It's Luke. What's the consensus of low-dose CT scans versus chest X-rays for health surveillance?
Yeah, it's what I understand, and I'm not a medical practitioner, so I'm not going to delve into this, but I'd be looking at the CT scans as against the X-rays. But once again, that's why our regs don't specify, and it's trying to use the medical practitioners that have got the latest knowledge, the up-to-date knowledge, the experience, for them to be able to use all the tools in their kit to the best advantage.
Okay. There are a few more questions, but I think we'll wrap it up now because we are over time. And I said we will download all the questions and we'll come back to you individually at the end of this.
Yep.
Thank
you
you,
all.
everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much.